Stanford University.
Well, I noticed my first typo. It is 2013. So when I was putting this talk together this morning and reading the abstract that Paul helped write, I became uncomfortable realizing that I'm used to giving talks in front of scientists, usually people that I know, and that this is in front of a completely different group, and the topic has little to do with science. And you know, aside from stand-up comedy, which is what my brother does in the evenings, I can't imagine anything more uncomfortable than me standing in front of you telling the Silicon Valley how money should be spent in the energy sector. So I decided that this was a trap, and that what I will do is to the extent that I think there's an overlap maybe between what the atmosphere here is in investing in energy-related topics and my own personal hurdles that I had to go through. So this is really about how I looked at this problem, and maybe there's a mapping to what others in the investment community are thinking about, and maybe this is useful, but at least it's safe. So 2010, I had graduated from Symix Technologies and was trying to decide what I wanted to do. Actually, 2009, I took that year off, and I concluded I did not want to work for a large established company again, and that I wanted to work on an important problem. I realized that I'm not a great manager. I'm mostly a chemist, and so that put certain boundary conditions. And I thought pretty heavily about this. So pure materials plays, I invented magic foo-foo dust, give me a lot of money. Those don't work very well as far as I could see. There are very, very few examples where a pure material has such immediate value that you can enrich your investors with that. Pure engineering plays, there are a lot of them in Silicon Valley. They're irrelevant to me. I am not an engineer. I am a chemist, and at Symix and even in my experiences at Exxon, bringing together really good chemists and really good engineers where there really is no barrier that is human, and focusing on a problem and watching that magic happen is really impressive things can happen. And so one of the criteria was that we needed to invent new materials. That needed to be important. And I needed to work with engineers, which I'm used to doing, having come from Exxon, which is basically an engineering company. So the sort of parameters as I thought about it is the target needs to be big and the impact has to be big. And that's because I was fortunate to work at two companies at really important times. And the research that we did was really interesting. And so if I'm going to put a lot of work into it, it needs to have the potential of meeting or exceeding, if we're successful, those experiences. For me to be relevant, new materials needed to be invented, so I was looking for a material play. But in contrast to Symix, where we worked with large companies and had mostly a licensing business model, I wanted to work on a problem where a real product was going to be brought to market and something that I could see through or be part of bringing it to market on a real time scale. And in short, we wanted to be self-reliant. We did not want to have another company have to make us successful. And then create and capture this value in less than 7 years. This correlates a lot with the graduation date of my oldest son. I'm 56 years old and I don't want to work forever. And I think this maps quite nicely to most of the venture capital models in Silicon Valley, but so that's that. My paradigm, and I come from Exxon, and I was born there. I spent 14 years there. And a lot of my prejudices about this space in 2005, when I first started hearing clean tech, are reflected in these three statements. These are large markets. They are practiced on a world scale. They are risk adverse. They take decades to change. They're slow. And they're price sensitive. So it really is who sells this at the lowest possible price. And if you've been around manufacturing of commodities before, you know that typically the cost of manufacturing scales directly with volume. And we're talking about large volumes here. We're talking about, at least my thinking of energy from Exxon is this is big. And so there's a huge capital infrastructure that has to be bought. And that's financing risk. And I know nothing about how to capture a lot of financing. So to me, this was the paradigm. I wanted to invent new materials. I needed the markets to be big. But how do we get around this cost volume financing risk issue? And so quite honestly, in 2010, early 2010, I was running from the energy sector. There is no larger, more price sensitive, more risk adverse, more capital intensive, slower moving, or worse fit for me market than energy. Drugs and pharmaceuticals are, the Silicon Valley. There's many, many examples of a molecule being commercialized and creating value early on. And I gave serious thought to healthcare and some interesting materials there. But fortunately, a good friend of mine, who's also an amazing engineer, Sam Berg, brought to my attention this area of electrochromic windows. And I will tell you how this is both an energy play and overcomes some of my fears associated with the top side here. But first, let me tell you why I am so scared, or was so scared, of the energy area, and particularly the fuels area. In 2009, Exxon made a decision. The company XTO, which I had never heard of, grew in 1985 to become the leader in hydraulic fracking and the largest asset owner in the United States for the production of natural gas. And Exxon, all through my career, and actually the career of my father's age, has invested in technology conversions for everything from coal to natural gas to sour crudes. And after studying this and really investing hundreds of millions of dollars in each of these areas, in 2009, they, on a Tuesday afternoon, put down a $31 billion check and bought XTO, and are now by far the largest, as far as I know, the largest asset owner of methane gas in this country. That's an energy play, and that's not a Silicon Valley play. It's not anything I know how to compete with. I found it interesting that the analysts called it a bet, and I don't think Mr. Tillerson, who's the CEO of Exxon, thought it was a bet. It was a decision. They made the decision that natural gas would be the future hydrocarbon for North America, and they placed that bet. And I think there's a lot of really neat technology to be done now about how to convert natural gas into chemicals, et cetera. But my initial instincts were, these are the kind of guys that play in this space, and that's not something that, in my decade of professional career, I'm going to be able to compete with. But this was really interesting, and it was new science for me. And so I'm now going to switch into coming up out of the depression here and talk about another really important problem. And this is, producing energy is one thing, but saving energy is another. This area of building energy efficiency is important. 40% of the U.S. primary energy is consumed by buildings. A big loss of energy is through windows and solar heat gain. There is a multi-billion-dollar industry that I was completely unaware of until a couple of years ago that's really beautiful, that involves very thin silver coatings on top of glass that create essentially band filters for reflecting the infrared radiation. But 50% of the radiation that comes through your window is actually visible light. And that light, when on a hot day and direct sunlight, actually contributes to the heating up of your furniture, and then your refrigeration systems need to take that heat out. And the DOE and LBL and everyone now agrees that if you could switch your windows from a tinted state to a clear state in an efficient, reproducible way, there's a huge amount of energy that you can save. And in fact, this is a building with Sage electrochromic windows on it in the East Bay. And this is the dark state. It's kind of a blue. And this is a beautiful clear state. And these things switch back and forth over 20 minutes to a half an hour to an hour, and do it fast enough on the time scale of the sun moving across your building that you can control heat. It's a really neat energy problem, and if you do the ROI calculations, you have to be really cheap compared to the next best alternative to have this be a good ROI-based investment. But the good news here, in contrast to, say, gasoline, which doesn't have an emotional attachment to it, it's all price-driven, it turns out that this feature of being able to turn your windows and avoid shades and control your environment is, from the consumer point of view, in addition to the energy savings, a big driver is just comfort and beauty and aesthetics and privacy. And just imagine having right now you buy your window and you look at everything in your window but the window. This is, and we're convinced, and I think everybody invested in this field is convinced that this could be, your primary sale here is going to be around the features, your ability to interact with your building, and and that's why you're going to buy it. The fact that you will save energy is maybe even secondary to most people, especially in an early adopter area. So this was really attractive to us, but it's particularly attractive because there's a business that you can start small and grow big, and that does, when it matures, it will have a material effect on energy. There's also it's a technical problem, okay? There's some beautiful work that's been done compared to solar. Not much money has been spent in this area. Some really smart people have worked in it. They've made these windows. They have some problems, though. One is the ability to, the manufacturing process and the materials they use today. There are some decent colors that you can get to, but you don't really have the ability to change the tint from a deep blue at this point. So there is some color limitation, and this is limited by the materials in the anode and cathode of these thin film lithium-ion battery-like materials. So for me, there's a materials play here, and one that I've become fascinated with. There's also a problem associated, especially in large area, with the switching properties. So you'll notice here, this is a picture of a real window. I think this is in the East Bay or it's an NREL, but they're all the same. They switch really slowly, and even when you switch them slowly, you find that the switching occurs at the edges where your electrical contacts are made, and there's a voltage drop across these transparent conductors that is in this direction, and the voltage in the middle is much lower than the voltage here, and so you find that the edges switch first. And so there's a huge opportunity here. This is kind of a new field. Chemists and engineers, and we in particular, decided that we could contribute to this, and contribute in terms of the device architecture, the process engineering to make these things in beautiful form, and actually design materials that allow you to access different colors and different contrast ratios and pull all this together into a product. And that's what we are about. So sort of the code that we cracked here, and I personally decided I would commit my money and my time into this, was that it was a technical problem and that there was a viable way, a strategy, and a set of tactics to build a business without first building a world-scale plant. And that's what we're all about. So where we are, so the idea here is that we envision products where you can do beautiful things with your room, that these are electronic viewing devices, if you will. There's a huge premium here, or requirement that these things are optically beautiful. The display industry is pretty good at that. In fact, they make really, I mean, this is basically big pixels. The display industry is very good at lots of little pixels. So we look at this as a big pixel problem. New materials, new processes, and devices need to be invented in order to create products like this. And I expect to see many generations of improvement. And this is just, I think, a fantastic venture bet, and certainly a great bet for me, because it is a technology problem and one for which you can access, I think, through innovation and the commercialization of high-value products, get into an energy-related business and get funding to do so. It all remains to be seen. It's in our hands where we are today. We were founded officially in 2010 as a Delaware corporation. We pre-seed financing, we were very blessed to be accepted into Delia Milaron's labs at the Molecular Foundry, where I did my first humbling experiments on electrochromic materials, but they were, that led to a seed financing round, and ultimately in September of last year, $16 million from two venture firms that are familiar to me and to CIMIX. These are really good organizations. We went out and hired ourselves a CEO to run the business. He comes from the display industry and brings a lot of energy and knowledge from that industry. And the other co-founder, Sam Berg, is the person I mentioned before. He's an electrical engineer and chemical engineer. I primarily am focused on the material science side, so we actually have a pretty sophisticated materials discovery engine, very CIMIX-like. CIMIX brought automation to materials discovery, but we also have a strong process engineering group, and we're making devices on large scale. And the theme is really to look at what can you learn from display industry manufacturing practices and what discoveries need to be made in order to enable a process to make big, huge windows with wires coming out of them that are optically beautiful. So I may be ahead of schedule, I may be behind, but I am done. Thank you.
So we're going to hold questions to the end of the seminar, which will be around 23 minutes from now. So next up are Brian and Craig.
Sorry. So thank you for coming, and thank you for having us, Paul. Though I am 12 years older than my business partner, Brian, he actually graduated about 6 months before me with his PhD. So it's still relevant what I'm going to say from my own perspective about a graduate student's guide to why, how, and when to start a startup, because I was there less than 2 years ago. And we all get to this point where you're in grad school, the light's at the end of the tunnel, maybe you're 1 or 2 years away, and you understand that you have a couple choices here. Academia is, something you've been in your whole life. You understand that. Your advisor understands that. National labs, you can talk to people who have done it. You've been there yourself to do research. And then big industry. Particularly at Stanford, a lot of people are connected in. I know my advisor, Mike McGee, was very connected in, so I understood what that path looked like. But an incredibly important part of this ecosystem is the startup. And I think even though we're surrounded in Silicon Valley by so many different startups, I think it's the most poorly understood of the choices for graduate students. And yet, as I said, it's so important because ideas that come out of academia and national lab, all the products you see around you at one point were likely a startup, right? The ideas come out, they're tested by startups. Most of them, people say, this is garbage, and they throw it away and the business goes under. We've seen that happen time and time again, particularly in the solar industry. But some of them make it, and they become big industry. Examples, out of the material science department, Amprius was started by Yishui. And this is a company now that's had multiple rounds of financing, and they still haven't proven it yet, but they're in the mode of proving this and trying to become a big industry or a big industrial player. And then Cree, started in the late 80s out of NC State. These guys are now a multi-billion-dollar company and real market leaders in LED lighting, right? So what Brian and I hope to do today is to kind of demystify the startup and give you a little perspective and a little advice on, at least from our perspective, how you can get involved. So very basic, everyone knows this. What is a startup? It's a group of people with a common vision, trying to solve a pain in the marketplace and hopefully at a profit. Now, the thing I want to stress here is that you're trying to solve a pain in the marketplace, you kind of shift from doing cool science, right, to actually solving something that someone will pay you for. And it starts with some founders with a vision, and I'll let you choose which one is Brian and which one is me here, right? But the founders have this vision, and they're able to maybe do some work on it, maybe not yet. In our case, we hadn't done a lot of work on it yet. But we're able to convince people that we could do the work. And they gave us a little money, in which case, this is the seed financing. We got it from the government. But you can get it from friends and family. You can get it from an angel investor and so forth. But that's the stage that you're at. And what do you do with that money? Well, you hire your core team. And you get your core team of technologists around you. And these are people who are going to help you flesh this out. They get you to this prototype or close to the prototype stage. The idea being, let's take the biggest pillars of risk off the table that raises our valuation that someone else says, OK, I'm willing to put a little bit more money into you guys. And what happens? You hire your sort of expansion team. And these people then help you either finish the prototype or even help you through the pilot line stage. And the reason I'm showing this is that you need to decide as you think about where you want to fit into a startup, what these people do. And so if you take a look at business tasks, clearly at the founder level, it's a larger percentage of your time. You're dealing with multiple things that maybe a lot of you haven't dealt with yet, and that's okay. You don't necessarily have to have that experience yet. And inversely, your lab work. It's very heavy down as an expansion team member. And I'm not going to say it's light up here, but as a percentage of your time, it's lighter. And along with this comes your diversity of tasks. So at the founder level, you may have 10 to 12 different things that are constantly flowing through your mind from a technology side as well as the business side that you're juggling, which has implications for your lifestyle. And then as you go down into the expansion team, your focus becomes narrower and narrower, which can be very good for certain people, but maybe not optimal for other people. And then the most important one, I think, is this work-life balance. I can't tell you how many grad students I talk to. As a founder, you really do sacrifice a lot in your work-life balance. So if you're the guy that says, I'm cycling 4 hours a day, to hell with everything else, don't start a company. Be an expansion team member. You can find the time to do that, right? So but again, this is very important. When you look at this sort of matrix here, you think about what you want out of your career, where you want to be, and what really your skill set is, and you can think about where you want to fit into this. But to be a little bit more specific, the founders do have a 24/7 lifestyle. They have things like the vision, the tech roadmap, fundraising, business development, hiring, oh yes, lab work, because you have to make your product as well. And if this is a little daunting, and you say, well, I've never done any of this, the only thing you actually have to do is the vision and lab work. You need to do those two things. You can find the ecosystem around you that's built up in Silicon Valley to support you with the other things. And maybe your co-founder has had prior experience as an example, but that's not even necessary. And then the other important thing is you may be sitting out there like a lot of people are going, well, I love doing lab work and I don't want to just become lost on the business side. That's okay. This is very heavy in the early stage when you're trying to just get everything under you because you need to be able to pay people, right? So you get the money and you find the right people to hire. And once that's over, this is heavy after that. So Brian and I today spend about 80 to 90% of our time actually in the lab with our freaking lab coats on doing work. Now, that will subside when we have to go out there and raise another round of financing. But in that sense, it's actually very exciting. As a core team member, you can expect to put in 12-hour days. 60 to 70-hour work weeks, I think, is reasonable because you have to manage multiple tech tasks. You're in the lab all the time, and you're supporting the business. You're helping to write patents. You're helping to write grants to the government. So, thus, a very long work week. If you go down to the expansion team member, now we're talking 9 to 10-hour days, and I don't think you're going to find a job in Silicon Valley that you would necessarily want where you're working less than 9 to 10-hour days. That's just sort of a baseline here. And again, you become very focused. And I'll give you one example. We have a friend who graduated with his PhD from Mike's group, actually, and he went and joined a solar startup as a core team member. And in his job, he got to manage 5 or 6 different processes in making a silicon solar cell and doing some advanced R&D on the side around this. Well, that company didn't make it, as many didn't, and he joined another solar startup, but this one was sort of 50 to 80 people at the time. And when he was interviewed, he's like, okay, well, what's my job? They said, your job is to work on anti-reflective coatings. And he said, what else is my job? They said, that's your job. And so you become much narrow, your focus becomes much narrower, and that's okay for certain people if that's what you like. If you want to dig into a task and just nail it, this is actually quite a good job. So what I want to focus on, though, that's what today is about, are the founders. How do you kind of get going? I'm hoping that there are enough of you out there that say, I want to give it a shot. I want to understand what it's like to go out there and start a business. Well, it all starts with an idea. And for some people, it's their thesis topic. And I say this company here, no one will know it, Heliotrope Technologies, but they also do electrochromic windows. And they are out of the molecular foundry, and they were just funded to do this. And it was one student's PhD topic that he worked on. He said, I think it's ready. And he was able to turn this into now a business. Who knows if it will work, but he's there. But for us, we realized that what we were immediately doing, we didn't think was ready for commercialization. It was a few years off. So we said, let's expand into our field of research because we have transferable skills, and that's totally fine. There's a learning curve you have to get up, but as a PhD student, there's always a learning curve you're trying to get up, so you can do it. But don't limit yourself to that. There's also there are other fields with transferable skills. And there's a company here, Solemn. They were actually started out of Stanford as well, the applied physics department. And these guys did a lot of optics. They were laser guys, right? And they started a business now that's been funded through 2 rounds of financing and doing very well in the agricultural space. They do soil sampling. So go figure, right? But nevertheless, it's good to expand your horizons. And we'll talk about how to do that in 1 second. So the take-home message here is don't get so narrowly focused and think, oh, what I did with my thesis, it's just not a business, so therefore I can't start a business. That's not true. So how and when to begin brainstorming? The professors in the room are going to hate this, but I feel very strongly about this. You need to start 1 to 2 years before you graduate, I think. You can always start later. It's easier to start earlier. And just put it this way, there's not a person in any walk of life, whether it's a professor, whether it's a grad student that's going on to a postdoctoral position, that doesn't spend a year before they go thinking about where they want to go and applying. So if you want a professorship, you're going to spend at least a year going through the application process and trying to get a position. It's the same if you're trying to get a job. It's the same if you're trying to start a business. So I'm not to say it's a big part of your time, but start thinking about it. What we did is, and I'm not sure Mike knows this, is we created 6 teams of 4 students, and we met privately at night, so it wasn't during lab time, it was at night, and we educated ourselves on the details of the power grid and the solar industry, and we got as smart as we could. We dug in deeply into the cost structure, the technologies, where the pain points were, to identify what those problems were where we thought we could provide real value and real solutions. So for us, this was effective. For the applied physicists, what they did is they met twice a month. They had 6 to 8 people. And one person's job was to go out, find a problem, anything in the world, and come up with a possible solution. And then they would all talk about it and think of better solutions. And they went through some garbage ideas. I was in a couple meetings. It was just terrible. But they ultimately came across the UN website, and they saw that agricultural runoff was poisoning rivers, as we know. And it was because of inefficient fertilizer application. And it was because it's expensive to do soil sampling. And they said, well, why is it so expensive? They dug in. And they said, why can't we just do it a different way? And they did. And as I said now, they're working actually with big farmers in the Midwest. In a lab here in Silicon Valley, soil is sent over by the truckload, and these guys are doing soil sampling. So it's very interesting. And the thing I will caution you about, though, for full disclosure, from PhD Comics, which we all loved, was that grad students love to get distracted. They're easily distracted, right? But if you're going to go out there and try to start a business, if you're unable to manage brainstorming at night together with your research, then probably starting a business is going to be tough for you because you're going to have to manage a lot more than that once the actual startup occurs. So I would say don't look at this as a deterrent. This is just part of the learning process for actually multitasking. So let me just leave you before I turn it over to Brian. As a grad student, I'm sort of covering those years, and he's going to cover what you do after you actually have the idea. What I would say is become an expert in your field. Malcolm Gladwell wrote this book called Outliers, and he said if you want to become an expert, you need to do something for 10,000 hours diligently. I think that's partially true. You know, the time range is up for debate. But you need to be in the lab and doing a kick-ass PhD. You just need to, because that's going to pay off much more than spending time doing other things, as we'll see in a second. Also, if you can, manage a research project from start to finish. Come up with the idea, map out a plan, hopefully have an undergraduate or a first-year grad student that you can manage through the process because it's good for you, and then ultimately complete the project, because you're going to do this again and again and again if you start a business. And help your advisor write a grant proposal. This is maybe the most important one. We have now written 8 grant proposals. 5 of them were funded, and we've raised over $1.5 million for our business that is non-dilutive, meaning they don't take equity in your business. They give you grant money, and you get to operate your business. That's very, very valuable. So if you can get good at writing grant proposals, and it will help your advisor because they don't like writing grant proposals, right? This is a win-win. And the thing I will say is the common mistakes, believing that you should be getting or need an MBA to do this, and you neglect your research. And we had a couple friends that did this. They went off into another department. They started taking all these classes. That is not important. It is just not. You will find someone who has the experience. What you need to do is be a kick-ass technologist. And extracurricular activities, the real downfall at Stanford I saw was ultimate frisbee. Like that was the one, right? Everyone would extend their PhDs by a year to 2 years by playing ultimate frisbee. Now, I'd like to think that Brian and I became pretty good beach volleyball players, but you can fit it all in, but just don't let that be your sort of, your theme in grad school. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and he's going to talk about what's next after you've gotten this point.
So Paul asked Craig and me to talk to you guys today, and the first part was what Craig just discussed, which is what is it like to be in a startup? And the second half is how do you really go about thinking about doing a startup at Stanford? And I think that there's a lot of great classes. Craig was a TA for the technology venture formation class. for 2 years that'll give you some more details. But I'm going to talk today more about how to think about it organically. Okay? And the two things that the thing that Craig really has here is that being a good researcher in grad school is tantamount to being a good co-founder. And the reason for this is because if you're a great researcher, you learn how to ask the right questions. Asking questions in research and asking questions in startups are really the key to get you moving. And there's a couple different phases. So Craig talked about choosing an idea, and he gave you a couple of examples of how people brainstorm together to figure out if an idea is worthwhile. Then you need to make a plan. And really this determines what kind of milestones, what kind of company are you really looking to develop? What's your big challenges? You need to build the A team, and I'll describe that in a second. And the team and the time and the equipment that you're going to need really determines how much fundraising you need to do. And I'll spend a little bit of time discussing that. Then you need to execute, which we're working on. And then hopefully you're successful and you can spend your money any way that you want to. And I'm not going to discuss that because that hasn't happened to Craig and I. But we are going to cover the rest of the topics. So the first thing is, how do you build a plan? Okay? And if you really want to think about it, it's asking the right questions, like I said before. And these are 5 important questions for you to really think about before starting a company. And the first one is, what need are you trying to satisfy? If you're going to make something a fraction of a % better, is that enough to move the industry's needle? Is that even important? If you think about what's available in the industry right now, what's the solar cell efficiency and prices right now, when you get out into the market 5 years later, those are going to be different. You need to find out, you need to determine if this stuff is actually going to be viable. It's the most important one of them all when thinking about creating your plan. You don't want to spend 2 or 5 years of your life working on something that never had a shot from the beginning. The other thing is, what's the major showstopper? Is it a legal issue? Is it a technical challenge? Is it a scaling challenge? Like, what is your biggest problem? A lot of people that already have a prototype, they're like hammers looking for a nail. Okay, they're like, oh, I got this great device, and like, well, what's the market? Well, they don't know. Well, that's your biggest problem. Quit working on your project and go find a market for it. If you have an idea of what you want your dream solar cell to be, all right, but it's technically very challenging, get the right technical people. These are the issues you want to think about. Then what resources are required to start? Do you need a little bit of money or a lot of money? And how long is it going to take? Because the time it takes from the time you raise venture capital money to the time that you IPO is a really big concern for people. So once you've created the plan, you can then think about building your A team. And I know most of you think that the A team probably involves Bradley Cooper and Liam Neeson, but there was an original show. And for the older people, and by the way, this show was like 4 when I came on. I watched a lot of bad TV and played video games as a kid, so you probably get that impression with these slides. But the A team is a perfect example of a really lean, mean startup. And the reason why is that they will find exceptionally skilled people that do very specific tasks. So you don't want to clone yourself when you think about a startup. You want to identify your problems. You want to bring people in that really know what's going on, that really provide real value into the system. There are also only 4 people. You want to stay lean. The biggest problem I've seen with some Stanford startups is, as Craig was saying, they think they need to get an MBA. They also think that they need to bring in MBAs. And I think people at the GSB are great. I have several friends at the Graduate School of Business that have graduated from here. But for some reason, they always want to bring in 2 or 3 people to work with them. And that's totally unnecessary. For every one that you bring in, you got to pay between $100,000 and $200,000, and just increases your burn. You want to keep your burn as low as possible if you're working on very risky companies. Anything with a lot of technical risk, it makes no sense to bring in MBAs early on. If they can't be in the lab with you, they're probably not as useful. Also, what I like about the A team, very little management. This is Craig, by the way. He's Hannibal. I think it's good to wear a lot of hats. If you're young, you sometimes think you need a gray-haired CEO. Blonde hair works fine for us. Going back to say, if it's really a technical challenge, okay, it's not a business thing. If I'm not going to make a 25% efficient solar cell in the end of the 3 or 4 years that we're thinking about, it doesn't matter who's on my board of directors or who funded me. It's just not going to work. So really focus on your technical task if you have a technically oriented startup team. Then the last thing is, if you're in a really high-risk environment, and every early-stage material science clean tech play is high risk, your A team is more important than your idea, because you're going to find that idea, for whatever reason, whatever the 5 steps that Mario Brothers had on there, that you might fail in one of these areas. And when you do that, you want to move on. And you're going to want to move on with the team that you have. So you want to be sure that you get along with them, that you can trust them, and that they work as hard as you do. And one of the common mistakes I've seen with people that start up companies at Stanford is there's really 1 or 2 guys that are extremely dedicated to their company. There's one guy that's like, oh, if you get funded, I'll come in. They do it like a half-assed way. Do not work with those people. They should be as committed as you are towards the beginning to do this, because you're going to resent them over time. All right? So once you decide how many people you want to bring in and what kind of resources you need, then you can start thinking about having to raise capital, okay? And I think when I was a grad student at Stanford, we come in with this mantra that we really want to get venture capital funding. Oh man, if Khosla or Kleiner would fund me, it would really validate my technology. Well, if you've seen solar companies out there, this does not validate your technology, okay? And I'm going to be a little contrarian here, and I'm going to say that venture capital is not necessarily what you would want. All right? And the reason is you have to look at things from the perspective of a venture capitalist. And my favorite venture capitalist fun facts are up here. The first one is that venture capitalists want to own 30 to 50% of your business, usually during the Series A. And that's with the expectation that you will be a $500 million company in 3 to 8 years. Okay? Their financial models, how they choose companies, is totally predicated on catching whales. And whales are these massive companies that are going to come out, okay? They're actually horrible at picking companies. If you look at their track record, okay, half of their companies don't return them any money and usually lose it, okay? They make almost all of their money. They break even on their biggest whale that they bring in with each fund. So these guys are funded through limited partners, and they have 5 to 8 years to spend this money. So they literally are whale hunting, all right? And the last thing is that their interest is to accelerate this. The most important thing for them is not how much money they're putting into you. It's when they can get their return. So they will put a lot of money into you, try to accelerate your research. And in clean tech investing, as we've seen with a plethora of companies, accelerating research is time intensive. There's only so much you can do throwing resources at it. You need to have time to figure it out. I think a lot of these companies in the clean tech sector were rushed early on. So with this knowledge, there's really 4 things that they look at. They look at your potential market size, and with clean tech, that's very large. They want to look at your margins, how quickly you can scale up, and for IT companies, that's very fast. It's very, once Google has alpha and beta tested their software, they can put it out for you guys to download in an extremely efficient way. This is not true as stuff that Howard and I work on. And then the last part is what's their time for return. So if you look at some of the whales that we've had in Silicon Valley, you see that Google took 6 years to get to market, had a $23 billion market cap when it went public. Facebook took 8 years, had a $104 billion market. Those are just a general idea of what works for venture capitalists. If you look at clean tech, there's a couple of challenges versus information technology companies that actually really affect how the investments are happening. And the first one is that a lot of clean tech companies have to compete against commodity markets, okay? So as Howard was pointing out, 30% of his value is only adjusted with the energy efficiency saving. There's a 70% aesthetic value that's existing for him. I make solar cells. Craig and I make solar cells. And we compete with coal, all right? And these businesses typically result in having low margins. So while we might have a very large market, our margins might be very low. They've been compressed. So first, Google currently has margins of over 30%. First Solar, which is the whale of the clean tech industry, has margins that are sub 5%, as an example. The second thing is it takes a long time. It takes a very, very long time for clean tech material science companies to come to fruition. So we're talking about Facebook and Google taking 6 or 8 years to reach market. First Solar started in 1984, okay? And they didn't go public until 2006. And I will guarantee that every one of their initial investors did not make money. Okay? SunPower, love Dick Swanson, great company, right? Started in 1985 from Stanford. They didn't go public till 2005. Look at their market caps. They're an order of magnitude lower than what you see with Facebook and Google. So this is not the kind of whale that they want to hunt for because there's certain issues that you have. It takes much longer to scale up these technologies, and they don't have the same time of return, and they don't have the same margins, so they don't have the same market cap values. So you have to be very aware that VCs are no longer thinking about this space in the same way. And a lot of them are kind of like sheep, and it became very popular between like 2002 and 2008 to invest in clean tech startups. I would say that in 2007, there was probably between 50 to 75 companies that would be willing to invest in early stage clean tech companies. I would say now that there's less than 10, and that's conservatively speaking. I actually think there's only 5. So you should be aware of this when you think about it. But it's not all doom and gloom because there's a lot of great stuff to think about with government money, okay? We're a huge proponent of working with the government, primarily because it's non-dilutive funding, which means if we get money from them, they don't own any equity. And it really allows us to fire bullets and not cannonballs. So if you get a Series A investment from Khosla, it's with the expectation that the technology that you pitch them will go to market and become a $500 million company, right? If you get a $95,000 grant from the state of California, it's a feasibility study. You can actually look at it and think about, is this technically feasible? Is this going to hit the prototyping goals that I set for it? Is it going to be useful for me in the future? So I'm going to talk about a couple different opportunities that I don't think are usually discussed in the technology venture formation class, but that are very useful to you if you want to think about incubating a company this way. So the first one is the California Energy Commission Energy Innovation Small Grant Program. The paperwork's a pain in the ass, but it's $95,000, and if you don't want to eat ramen, it's a really good grant for you. The other ones are small business innovative research grants. We actually found this out through talking to some of our friends at Stanford. They're programs that are available from every department of government. So the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, National Science Foundation, NIH, you name them, they've got them. They usually have a phase 1 grant that's between $100,000 and $150,000. They last from 6 to 9 months. If you're successful, you can get a phase 2. They go from, they're worth anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million. So both of these kinds do not require cost share. So if you write this grant and you're fortunate enough to win it, you don't need any private financing to match this. Other programs, if you're into solar like we are, they have the Sunshot program. And they actually, besides awarding money to people like Mike, they also award money to companies. So we've been very fortunate to receive grants. And these grants can range anywhere between $350,000 and $10 million. And if you can also look at ARPA-E for clean tech projects. And DARPA, you know, the Defense Department is actually very strong and has a very pro clean tech position. So you can actually win quite a bit of money from them as well. Sunshot and ARPA-E both require cost match, and that's a different story for a different time, but it's still very good sources of funding. So the other thing you think about is, we talked about using a small team to stay lean and to be flexible and to fire these bullets instead of cannonballs. If you're not 100% sure the technology that you have is really what it's good, you haven't prototyped it to the level that you think you should scale it, and I think this is one of the largest mistakes that clean tech companies have made, then you really want to try to lower your burn and really work out the science. And you can do that at national labs. So Howard and our company have both been incubating or both been working as users at the Molecular Foundry, which is a Department of Energy user facility at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. And the way that a user facility works, there's actually 5 or 6 spread out all over the United States, is that you can write a grant to do science there. And if it's accepted, you can work there for about 12 months. And these facilities are beautiful. This is on top of a mountain. I can see the Golden Gate Bridge. I can see the Bay Bridge. I can see San Francisco. It's a really wonderful place to work. And it has, I would say, $30 to $40 million of fabrication and characterization equipment. So you can pretty much walk in once you've been accepted and get your research started right away. It's a great facility, and it allows you to really figure things out quickly. And because you're not spending a lot of money, you haven't completely committed with a Series A round, you can be, failure's okay. So the idea that we're working on now is not our first idea or our second. It's closer to our third idea. We've become more comfortable as we move on and kind of pick these out because we can do this at the Foundry. I will say that this is for cutting edge science. So we do very early stage research and development. It's not for people that want some lab space to save money on electricity to do some basic engineering. This is non-proprietary. So it means we plan on publishing it. We will publish this year on some of the techniques that we've been developing. But by and large, this is meant to do early stage development. So one of my last slides is, you guys have one of the greatest gifts of all. You have an email address that ends in .stanford or @stanford.edu. And you know, why we talk about wanting to create questions to help guide your business, you don't have to answer them yourselves. You don't have to find it in a book or in a class. You can go out and be proactive and talk to people. And you would be shocked by the number of people that will positively respond to you. So I would say, conservatively speaking, Craig and I have contacted over 75 people in the last 3 years to talk about some form of our business. We've talked to venture capitalists, we talked to program managers at government agencies, CEOs and CTOs of major companies, lawyers and accountants, and other startups, all for free, okay? And I'd say during that whole time, only one person has not returned my emails, and that is Charlie Gay at Applied Materials. So if anyone here knows Charlie Gay at Applied Materials, would you have him contact me? I would really like to talk to Charlie Gay, okay? So how does the Socratic Staircase of Mario Brothers work for you guys? I think that's a valid question. And so Craig and I decided that we wanted to do some material science development on new materials for solar cells that we thought would really bring the cost down. And what that means for us is developing tandem solar cells that are very cheap. So I'm not going to get into details, but currently the average solar cell efficiency in a module is 16% for silicon. If you can imagine making a tandem solar cell with silicon that's 25% efficient without really adding a lot of cost, it's a home run in this area. So from the economic perspective, if you can do it, that'd be great. But you know, everyone wants a pony. The question is, can you actually make the solar cell with the efficiency that you want, and can you get these material properties that are desirable? So we recognized that that is what we wanted to do, and we knew that this was going to be a 2 to 4 year research project. before we even thought about scaling anything to the wafer. We're looking to make things the size of our thumbnail. So we decided to work out the Molecular Foundry because they have great facilities and we have great teams. We applied for government grants, so we've won over $1.5 million, most of it jointly with staff members at the Molecular Foundry for us to do research together. And we've raised private capital from Elon Management, which is a small family investment office in San Francisco that has an early stage clean tech focus. And this has allowed us to hire roughly 20% of the graduating PhD class at Stanford in 2011. And so this is my A team. And Steve was from Yi Shui's group. He's an amazing chemist. He's one of the best material chemists at Stanford that year. Ed also won a material science gold medal. He's an optoelectronics guru, and he also is really great with computers. So we've created databases. He's created databases and automated almost all of our equipment. We drink coffee and let our stuff run. It's pretty awesome. And then you've seen Craig. And then Randy is actually a lieutenant colonel in the Army, so maybe he should be Hannibal. But he's excellent at building equipment. So we build very specialized equipment to do some very fancy tests. And so this is our team, and we're very happy with them. All right, so with this, we can stand up and take questions and take comments. Thanks.
Okay, we have time for some questions. And in the tradition of the seminar, we particularly encourage and welcome questions from students. So please, questions for any of the speakers or for the collective. Yes? Yeah.
So it appears that Plant PV is doing a business that does not require as much capital in scaling up as a traditional solar business, or a lot of the traditional businesses, maybe electronic windows as well. How do you think that people are interested in creating those companies, if venture capital money isn't a good model for clean tech, should get the capital they need in order to scale up? Because it's orders of magnitude higher than some of the grants that you're showing.
But are you asking, with our business, you were saying that we wouldn't require as much money to scale up?
Well, or even if it does, where do you suggest?
So we took a strategic position. So what we wanted to do is we saw a lot of mistakes that were made in the past. We had sort of like hindsight behind, right? We had the benefit of hindsight, and a lot of people tried to scale rapidly by raising venture capital money. And what that did is it locked them into a trajectory, right? Once you raise that venture capital money, they want a return of X, and the only way you're going to get that return is either you scale up massively, right? Or someone comes in and buys you for a very large amount of money, which is not going to happen until you scale up to a certain point. So either way, you're scaling up. With a business like ours, we said, listen, let's not take that approach. There's some basic science we got to hammer out. We want to do that, build the prototype, and then partner with someone who has the scaling knowledge, a First Solar of the world, right? A Suniva, as an example, of the world, so that they can leverage what they do best together with what we do best, which is come up with sort of the cutting-edge solution, right? And that alleviates some of that VC money that's needed to scale up. Does that answer your?
Yeah, and the flip side might be that we wouldn't create a company that's worth $500 million. Maybe it's worth $5 to $50 million. But as an example, the time path to liquidity is a lot faster because we're not having. Because I know you worked at Selectel, right? So you've seen that challenge. You've seen the down round. No one wants to go through that. So I think that's kind of how we've decided to work in this space. Yeah.
Further questions? Come on. Yes.
So between starting a startup and moving into a company and trying to innovate in their space, I mean, there are a lot of startups that are trying to address these problems. So how did you decide that a startup was a better way to tackle that problem versus going into a company and trying to innovate in-house?
I think that's a great question. One, I think that large companies, particularly in the solar industry right now, if you look at the landscape, the players out of Asia generally are not innovating heavily. That's not their specialty. It may be in the future, but right now it's not. The players in the United States are doing, certainly like First Solar is doing R&D, but very specific to their product right now. They're not thinking outside the box right now because remember, the market is very tough for everyone. It's a commoditized product. So the question is, would they go ahead and spend many millions of dollars doing advanced R&D on a next generation cell? I don't think that they would give you the freedom to do that at First Solar. Maybe they would, and also just in general, in a startup, you can move so much faster. You just can. I mean, you can outmaneuver big businesses and it happens all the time, right? It's not to say that innovation doesn't come out of big businesses, but a startup that's run properly can outmaneuver big businesses all day long.
Question, Andrew?
Yeah. So you talked about a lean, flexible team, and for all of you, you showed 5 people up there on the board. And I guess traditional VC practice say like 2 to 4 people. They like smaller teams than that. So for both of you, like, what was this? Was 5 the original team? And I don't know what the size of your team was. Also, you said you want people that like focus on their PhD fully and didn't do other things. So do you then need a larger team to face all the different challenges?
So I think part of that is determined by the funding. That, like I was trying to say, you should figure out what you want. But those people had very specific skill sets that we were looking for. And I think the difference between 4 and 5 people is not huge. The difference between 4 and 5 and 10 is much different. And I think the way that you would evaluate that, if you think about constructing your plan, is like, what are your major showstoppers, and who do you need to solve your pains? Like Steve Connor is an amazing chemist. I suck at chemistry. All right. Howard's great at chemistry. I suck at chemistry, and I really need him to help me if I have these questions. Randy, as an example, builds chambers, and we have these amazing chambers to kind of vary a lot of processing parameters. Typically, people like First Solar might be able to vary 2 processing parameters. We can probably vary like 5 or 7, and it's because this guy's been doing it for 20 years. So it's really based on your need, more so than like any set number. So.
And I would think that most people that looked at our company from industry would say, you're only doing this with 5 people? Like that would be their reaction, because what we're trying to do is very, very hard. I mean, it is. It's very fundamental science. And building a solar cell in general, you can see how many people it took to build cylindrous solar cells, or how many people it would take to do Mia Soleil, right? And that's a single junction. But what we're doing is we're focusing on the important areas of the solar cell to try to build core intellectual property around that ultimately you can use to partner with. Again, that's the key. If we were actually trying to then scale this, 5 people is a joke, right, to do that. But to do some advanced R&D, 5 people actually is still, we're tight right now as it is.
We have a lean 30%.
I think you guys are absolutely right. We're going to get into at least our investors, we use we call it a cannonball approach, but we are trying to build a company and create a technology and innovate on materials, on processing, and we're deadly serious about building a product and doing it in less than a decade. And so our investors come from the sort of biotechnology side of things, and their models are typically 50 to $100 million invested over 5 to 7 years, and they want to see a product launch. And so that's, personally, the personal decision I made is that's my time scale. I want to see something happen in 5 to 7 years, and we picked a topic that we thought we could be successful in. Particularly because it isn't, these products don't exist, and it's not a commodity product at this point, so we really have a shot. But it is 30 people, and no duplication, and very little management. Your questions?
Talk about being a proponent of working with the government. Can you talk about 2 or 3 challenges of?
Well, first of all, I'm a libertarian, so there's a personal challenge.
Just got to get over that hump, right?
Besides the money.
Right. I think the timing is probably the hardest thing. Is the government funding opportunities come when they come, number one. They are approved when they're approved, and the funding kicks in when it kicks in. And it's not defined, right? So you need to figure out how to balance multiple people's desire to actually get paid with when these funding opportunities come about.
Yeah.
And so that's, I would think, the biggest drawback from it.
Yeah, and a precise example of that would be, so I talked about the Small Business Innovative Research Grants, okay? And I said that the first 150,000, you have this 6 to 9 month window, all right? And if you're successful, you have to wait about 8 more months to find out if you won your phase 2 for 500,000 or $1 million. But there's no money at that time, right? So if you're eating well in those 6 to 9 months, you might need to go live with your mom for a little bit, or sleep on a couch for that time.
But that's not a full joke. I mean, you need to talk to your team and say, listen, it's feast or famine at times with this model, but if the ownership structure is right and they feel like they have enough ownership where they go, this makes sense to us and we're willing to give up salary for these dark periods, it's great.
Yeah. Now, having said that, we have private financing and it smooths a lot of it out. The other problem with government money is you need to spend all of it at the allotted time. So I think that we would be capable this year, if we just sat down together and wrote 8 grants, okay, 8 government grants, we could probably raise $2 or $3 million in government grants. But we would have to spend all of that in a 1 to 2 year period of time. And our burn rate is not that high. We need substantially less than that with our current situation. So, you know, it would be nice to tuck it away like a chipmunk, but that is not an option that you have.
Right. And then the last one is just the maintenance of it. I mean, it's laborious. All the reporting you have to do, let alone the grant proposal itself,
Yeah.
it adds to your schedule.
Ask any professor about that, though.
Right.
They'll complain for 10 minutes.
Time for one quick question. Chris?
Howard, could you go back to this question of scaling in the case of going into what will ultimately be an architectural market? Do you anticipate that at these levels of funding and size, you can actually produce building size amounts of glass, or would you be working with a more conservative architectural glass company?
Yeah, so the way I'm looking at this is that it will be a long time before this is a commodity on the 50th floor of a building in downtown Manhattan. And so we've identified markets that are more reachable with form factors that are on the order of 1 meter to 1.5 meters in size. And I think, you know, the key for us is to find a market, a niche market that is sufficient to allow us to manufacture these products and sort of de-risk the product and demonstrate the manufacturing at a scale that in the first year or two is manageable. But ultimately, these things are going to have to be produced on pieces of glass that are, you know, 10 feet by 10 feet in size and demonstrated and durable. And so the trick here is, you know, how long will it take before that is realized is a different question than can you be profitable in your first manufacturing facility, and is there a market that you can serve realistically? And then do you see a path from that initial island of commercialization towards the bigger market? So it'll take time.
Well, we've reached the end of our time, but all three speakers will be available afterward for questions if there are questions that are unaddressed right now. And with that, we'd like to thank Howard, Brian, and Craig for their stimulating energy seminar.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.